Welcome back to Legacy Lines Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. When we sit down and talk about legacies on this show, we're usually looking at what people leave behind. The houses, the names, the stories that get whispered at reunions. It's usually a mix of the good, the bad, and the complicated. But today we're talking about a legacy that was violently, intentionally cut short. This isn't just a whodunit. It's a story about a man who tried to do the right thing in a system that had forgotten what right even looked like. We're diving back into the case of Michael Francke. If you caught our last episode, you know the basics. A high-ranking state official murdered right at the doorsteps of his own office. But today, we're going deeper. We're pulling back the curtain on the snakes under the stones, the evidence that vanished into thin air, and a cover-up that sat like a heavy fog over the state of Oregon for over 30 years. This isn't just a murder mystery, family. It's a masterclass in how a system protects its own dirty legacy by picking a fall guy and burying the truth so deep they thought it would never breathe again. Let's talk about the man himself. Michael Francke was what you'd call a straight shooter. He wasn't some career politician looking for a pension. He was a former judge, a college football player at UVA, and a man who stood 6'4" with a moral compass that didn't just point north. It stayed there. In 1987, Michael was recruited to Oregon for one specific dirty job: clean up a prison system that was rotting from the inside out. Now, I've seen enough in my life to know that when you send an honest man into a den of thieves, one of two things happen. Either he gets corrupted or he gets eliminated. And when we say corrupt, I'm not talking about a few guards taking an extra sandwich from the cafeteria. I'm talking about a business model. See, Oregon had this thing called the Hot Bunk Program. Picture this. The prisons are packed. And instead of fixing the problem, officials decide to let prisoners out for a week. While these guys are on break, they're doing exactly what they know how to do best: burglarizing homes, dealing drugs, and running the streets. And then, after all that, they go back into the joint. But they don't go back empty-handed. They bring the drugs and the cash with them. It was a revolving door that lined the pockets of the people in charge. It was an incestuous bunch of criminals, both inside and outside of the wire. Michael Francke was the man sent in to shut that door. But here's the thing about being a do-gooder in a room full of thieves. It makes you the most dangerous person in the room. By 1989, Francke was hearing the same stories over and over and over. From the inmates on the bunks to the corrections officers on the line, even from politicians in the State House. All roads led to a massive web of crime that reached the very top. On January 18th, 1989, Michael was ready. He had the receipts. He had floppy disk and stacks of paperwork tucked into his briefcase. He was scheduled to testify before a legislative committee the very next day. He was about to blow the lid off of the entire operation. He never made it to that meeting. Let's look at the crime scene first, because this is where the official story starts to look real shaky. Michael's car, a white Pontiac, was found in an office parking lot. The driver's side door was wide open, but Michael wasn't there. His body was found about 100 feet away, slumped on the north portico, or that's just a fancy word for the side porch, of the Dom building where he worked. Now, here is where the slow burn starts to get cold. The police claimed they did an exhaustive search of the area that night. His number 2 and number 3 men said they looked everywhere. They went top to bottom, but they didn't find his body for 4 hours. Think about that. You've got a 6'4" man lying in a pool of blood on a porch, and the experts searching the building can't see him? People said his beeper was going off incessantly in the dark. So you mean to tell me they couldn't hear that either? Oh, and here's the detail that will really get you. Michael's wallet was still in his pocket. And his expensive watch, it was still on his wrist. So if this was a car robbery gone bad, like the police tried to tell the public, why was the money all there? Why was his watch still on his wrist? The only thing missing was that briefcase with the disc, the documentation, and the names of people who were about to lose everything. So, whoever killed Michael didn't want his cash, wanted his silence. They needed that briefcase to disappear. And to this very day, it has never been found. So if the random robbery story was a lie, who was actually there? That night, a woman who worked in HR ran right into a man loitering in the hallway of the building. He didn't belong there at all. She gave a description and the police made a sketch. But the district attorney at the time, he didn't want the public to see it. He made every excuse in the book. He said the quality was bad, and he said it looked like too many other people. But eventually, that sketch leaked. And let me tell you, it didn't look like too many people. It looked like one man, Timothy Natividad. Natividad was known to be a violent drug dealer. He was part of the Kaiser Mafia. He was the kind of guy who always had a knife on him and was heavily involved in the flow of drugs in and out of the prison systems. Right after Michael Francke was killed, Natividad suddenly hit the lottery. He had stacks of cash. He was telling people he was moving to Hawaii, but he never made it to the islands. 2 weeks after that murder, he was killed in a domestic dispute. Convenient, right? Because dead men don't testify. If the police had a lead on a guy like Natividad, why did they turn their sights on a small-time meth dealer named Frank Gable? Because Frank Gable was easy. He was a guy on the margins. He didn't have a team of lawyers. He didn't have power. He didn't have any money. So that's who they picked up. The police didn't have a single shred of physical evidence against Gable. No DNA, no fingerprints, no murder weapon. So what did they do? They built a case out of thin air. They gathered a motley crew of witnesses, criminals and ex-cons who all had something to lose. They threatened them. They promised them leniency on the other charges. One witness, a 16-year-old girl named Jody Swingen, was interrogated 40 times. they gave her 24 polygraph tests. Imagine being a teenager wired up to a machine being told over and over and over, "You saw Frank Gable, didn't you?" Until you finally say what they want to hear just to make it stop. It's like a rigged game of Clue, but the stakes are a man's life. They even went to a hardware store, bought a knife off the shelf, and told the jury, "This is similar to the knife that might have been used." And on that evidence, Frank Gable was sent away for life. He sat in a cell for 30 years for a crime he didn't commit. Now, we have to ask the big question: why? Why would the state go to these lengths to frame an innocent man? Michael's brother, Kevin, has spent the last 3 decades of his life obsessed with that question. He didn't just mourn, he investigated. He even moved to Salem, set up shop, and dug through discovery files that the state hoped would never see the light of day. And what he found was a RICO-style cartel. He believes the hit wasn't just a prison job. He believes the mastermind was a legal representative from the Attorney General's office. Someone who had a very real reason to get rid of Mike. We're talking about a cabal that was profiting from a drug community that existed both inside the prison and outside. Prostitution, gambling, theft. It was a full-scale criminal enterprise operating under the protection of a state badge. There's even a sworn statement from a woman named Linda Parker, Neff. She reported hearing a high-ranking prison official talking about Michael's killer. He allegedly said they could never get anything right. It was supposed to look like a suicide and they botched it. He called the killers stupid because they left Michael by a door he never used. Think about that level of coldness. To talk about a man's murder as a botched job because he didn't die in a way that was easy to cover up. That is the dirty legacy we're exposing today. A system so invested in its own greed that it would rather assassinate a judge and steal 30 years from an innocent man than let the truth come to the light. In 2019, Frank Gable was finally exonerated. He walked out of those prison gates a free man after 30 years. But Michael Francke's murder, it's still unsolved on the official books. When I look at this story, I think about the courage it takes for Michael to walk into that building every day knowing he was surrounded by snakes. He knew he couldn't trust his number 2. He knew people were watching him, but he didn't flinch. As a veteran, I've seen what real courage looks like. It's not the absence of fear. It's standing your ground when the shadows are closing in. Michael Francke stood his ground until the very last second. He crawled 100 feet through the cold, trailing blood on the asphalt, trying to get back to his post. He died a soldier for the truth. I want to leave you with something today. We all face systems that feel too big to fight. We all see things that aren't right, and it's easy to stay quiet. It's easy to let the legacy of silence continue. But look at Kevin Francke, Mike's brother. He didn't have a badge. He didn't have a law degree. He just had the truth and the memory of his brother. He fought for 30 years. He didn't quit when the doors were slammed in his face. He didn't quit when the system told him he was crazy. Perseverance isn't about how fast you run. It's about staying in the race until the sun comes up. Coming from the north side of St. Louis, I've learned that our stories are the only thing they can't take from us. That's why I do this. Because I realize now that my voice and the voice I'm sharing with you right now is a living archive. Every time we speak a name that was meant to be forgotten, every time we pull a truth out of the shadows and put it on the record, we are keeping that archive alive. We are making sure that the legacy lines don't just record the lives of the powerful, but the courage of the righteous. Michael Francke was a spark. His brother Kevin became the flame. And today, the legacy of silence in Oregon is finally burning down because someone refused to stop talking. If you're out there today and you feel like the odds are stacked against you, if you feel like the truth is buried too deep, remember this case. The truth doesn't have an expiration date. Truth is patient. And as long as there's someone willing to stand up and speak it, it could never be defeated. Be the spark in your own life. Stand your ground. Your story matters. Your truth matters. And never, ever let them bury your legacy. Thanks for joining me on Legacy Lines Podcast. I'm Jay. Keep seeking the truth no matter how deep it's buried. I'll catch you on the next one. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the systems we live in, do me a favor and hit that like button. Follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. To tell your story, click the email below to inquire.